Hello, this is the Ancient and Medieval History lecture for Friday, the 4th of, for Thursday, for Friday, the 4th of December, 2020. Make sure that you are signed in as per the online attendance system. Where we left things is yesterday we saw a series of clips from the movie 300. Few things that are somewhat inaccurate. Number one, the Spartans did not run into battle wearing leather man panties and little else. No, they did not trust their rock-hard abs and pecs to block spears and arrows. In fact, the Spartans wore typical hoplite armor. Greaves, which were in the movie, a tunic, which was not in the movie, a breastplate, which was not in the movie, a hoplon, which was in the movie, a spear and a sword, which were in the movie, and maybe a cloak. Maybe, depending upon the circumstance. So, no leather man panties, number one. Number two, Xerxes was not a 7.5 foot tall, body-pierced mutant. Xerxes was a man. Looked like a younger, handsomer, more hirsute version of me. Bearded guy. King of kings of Persia. But he was not a god. Not really, because he was Zoroastrian. He was an agent of Ahura Mazda, according to the religion, but he was not God. That's not true. So, no giant 7.5 foot tall, weird mutant who likes grabbing other men by the shoulders, and not a god. Ephialtes was not a hunchback. He was a Greek who was smart. Smarter than he was good, because he saw that there was no chance that the Greeks could win against the world empire of Persia, and he decided to throw in with the enemy to become overlord and governor general, satrap of Greece under Xerxes. That was going to be his reward. Those are only a few of the inaccuracies. The 300 Spartans did not fight monsters. They did not fight undead, demon, ninja immortals. They fought men who were part of the 10,000 immortals. There are all sorts of little things like that you can just see as comic booky. But there's a reason why I show clips from that movie. First of all, it brings you into the spirit of things. Oh, and yes, the 300 Spartans had thousands of allies that helped them early in the battle up until the very last day. The reality, the Persian Wars, and of many wars between the West and the East, is that the free men of the West, usually well outnumbered, have to face the slave armies of the East. Whether those armies of slaves call themselves Persians, or Ottoman Turks, or communists, the idea of the West is the individual, the value and scope of individual liberty and freedom under a loving God that cares about each person. That is the basic core idea of Christian Western civilization, and the Greeks are a progenitor of that, an ancestor of that. They believed that they were free men, and they were. The Spartans, anyway, were free men fighting against slave armies of the East. The grand philosophy of Asiatic monarchies, as far west as Persia and as far east as China and Japan, is the organization of vast masses of humanity harmoniously. The Persians succeed at that, so do the Chinese and Japanese and others. But what that means is that they are not of the West. the idea of the individual being as important as the family is ridiculous in Buddhism as it is in communism. So, in Confucianism as it is in Buddhism or communism. So, what we have is the classic case of the free men of the West standing against the hordes of slaves of the East. The film does a good job of showing that, and also of showing virtue and bravery and other things like that, as well as way too much semi-naked male bodies, at least for me. Thermopylae was a case, in reality, where the Persians were funneled along a coastal road between cliffs and the sea. And the 300 Spartans, along with their allies, held their ground for 3 days. On the second night into the third day, they learned that the Persians had found the goat path around, and the allies retreat, and the Spartans remain to delay the Persians as much as possible. That all happened. And Leonidas and his 300 died, obedient to their duty. Go tell the Spartans, Simonides writes, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. And this is the epitaph of the 300 Spartans, which is still there at Thermopylae in Greece, carved into the stone. It's a real place, real battle. But the point of Thermopylae was not to win the war. The point of Thermopylae was to delay the Persians so that the Athenians would have time to empty their city, its people, its treasure, onto Salamis Island. And in this, they succeed. By the time Xerxes' army arrives at Athens, the Athenians have evacuated to Salamis. The Athenian fleet is inside the bay north of Salamis, and the Persian navy and the Persian army arrive. Xerxes orders Athens to be fired, not dismissed from employment, obviously, but burned to the ground. And he orders his troops to prepare to board after the navy clears the seas between the shore and Salamis. And he has a pavilion set up on a cliff overlooking the main area of battle so that he can observe and command in person. So this is the setup to the second great turning point, decisive battle in world history in the year 480 BC, the Battle of Salamis. The theory, the strategy, the tactics of Themistocles, the admiral in command at Salamis, is the same, in effect, as that of Leonidas of Sparta. The Athenian fleet and its allies hold the inner side of the narrow straits into Salamis Island. Xerxes' army will cross over the more placid bay waters once the Persians take control of these narrow spaces and destroy the much smaller Greek fleet and Athenian navy, and they will cross and land and conquer, and that will be the winning of the war, at least against Athens. That is Xerxes' plan. Themistocles, though, by holding the inner side of the straits, and by knowing that Xerxes is committed to having his troops load and cross the sheltered waters of the bay, knows that the fleet is not going to transfer troops onto this shore of the island. All Themistocles has to do is hold the narrows. Now, ship for ship, the Phoenicians are better sailors than the Greeks. But as naval warships, as biremes and triremes and war galleys, equipped with rams, archers, and small catapults and ballistas, the Greeks have no peer in naval warfare. And we're going to prove this right now. Because on the morning of the battle, Xerxes sets up with his maps and his models and his drinks, and he is looking at the battle, and he orders his fleet into the Narrows. Because of the way Themistocles has the fleet organized, the Persians actually come in slightly smaller numbers. The Athenians row forward, ram, pull back. Row forward, ram, pull back. Row forward, ram, pull back. As the Persians come in, they are fewer than the Greeks, the Athenians, and the Athenians just eviscerate them. Wave, rammed, sunk. Second wave, rammed, sunk. Third wave, rammed, sunk. Those few Athenian casualties are quickly replaced. The Persian casualties are replaced by an entirely new wave. An hour of this, the Athenians hold. 2 hours of this, the Athenians hold. Xerxes sees it all. He orders a flanking attack on the other narrows on the other side of the island. And the Athenians and their allies do the same thing on this side of the islands as they are on this side of the island. They hold their positions. They ram, they withdraw, they ram, they withdraw, they ram, they withdraw. Like masticating teeth, chewing teeth. They chew up the Persian fleet. Wave after wave, hour after hour, Xerxes watches tens of thousands of his men and hundreds of his ships destroyed. In late morning, as noon approaches, Xerxes inhales with a start, stands up, stock still, not looking at anyone or anything, turns on his heel, and goes into his tent. Nobody can get through to him for an hour. After a couple of hours, he comes out. The attack is over. We're going home. Xerxes not only orders the cancellation of the attack across the straits on either side of Salamis Island that day. He's done. He's seen too much. Too many men dying in his name. Too much carnage. This is evidence, by the way, that Xerxes is not a 7.5 foot tall, body-pierced mutant. His heart breaks. His will breaks. Wars are won and lost in a variety of ways at a variety of times. But the will to fight is always required. If you're going to be involved in a war, you'd better be willing to fight. If you're not willing to fight, it won't work. Xerxes, up until that morning, had been willing to do whatever it takes to win. But after he came out of the tent, he was a different man. The next day, he gave orders, and he and the better half of his army returned to Persia. He can't quite give up the idea of conquering Greece, but he's not going to do it personally. And the grand army of Persia of 500,000 men and the fleet of 1,000, 2,000 ships, they're not going to do it either. What's going to be left is about half the army under a general named Mardonius. The Rump Army, they're called. So Xerxes leaves. Now, remember this. Wars can be won or lost in the willpower of the participants involved. Logically, in the long run, there is no way Greece could have held out against a determined Xerxes with that army. Eventually, he would simply have bottled up the Greek ships, loaded troops somewhere else, and landed them on the shore, the outer shore of Salamis Island. Or he would have left the Athenians there and conquered the rest of Greece. He had the troops to do it. He had the ships to do it. Had he had the willpower to do it, he still could have won the war. But the combination of 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies holding off 500,000 men at Thermopylae, and then watching tens of thousands of loyal Persians and allies of the empire destroyed at his orders. That was it. His willpower was done. When the United States went into Vietnam, we were committed to fighting an easy war against what we considered to be an inferior opponent. The North Vietnamese were primitives. They had been colonial subject peoples to the French. They were not considered particularly impressive. Now, there were CIA operatives that had worked with them against the Japanese, that had taught the Vietnamese, under Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader, how to fight the Japanese. And they said the Vietnamese are actually quite impressive. But our generals didn't listen. They were little yellow people in a faraway primitive land, and we were the people who helped defeat the Nazis and the Japanese Empire. We had atom bombs. We were not going to be deterred from fighting communism in Vietnam. And I believe it was a good cause. I, unlike many people my age, think that Vietnam was a righteous fight. But we rarely took it seriously. Our generals and our politicians, for the most part, during the early discretionary phase of the war, played head games with the enemy. At no time until 1972, when Nixon is pulling out of Vietnam, did we unleash the full power of our military in any way. And that was just an air attack, a series of air attacks against Hanoi, the capital of North Vietnam. Logically, there's no way that the Viet Cong, the South Vietnamese communist guerrillas, and the North Vietnamese army could defeat the United States, our allies, and the South Vietnamese. Logically, in terms of numbers of men, in terms of resources, in terms of weapons, they couldn't compete. But they won. Not because they won every battle, they lost most battles. They won because they held out and committed themselves to victory at all costs. Communists are very good at fighting to the last man because the communist leadership is not in the front lines. They're ordering their people, who are disposable human resources, to fight to the last man. But they're very good at that. And the Vietnamese people are both proud and highly xenophobic. They did not like outsiders in their land. And this was a chance to get rid of them. So they fought us hard. Meanwhile, their ideological allies in American universities and pop culture convinced the American people that it was an unrighteous war that could not be won. And with the American will to fight broken between 1968 and 1972, we couldn't win. All we could do was withdraw with some modicum of honor, which President Nixon arranged in 1973. But then 2 years later, the North Vietnamese swooped in and conquered South Vietnam, and we let it happen. We let a free nation of millions of people fall to communism, and over 1 million South Vietnamese were murdered by the communists because they were stupid enough to trust that the United States would have their back. We were able to bring many refugees from Vietnam into this country, but it wasn't enough. A lot of our people, by that I mean South Vietnamese who were loyal allies to the United States and who were dedicated to the freedom of their country, died because we left them behind and the communists got a hold of them. Wars can be won and lost in the willpower. And our will to fight in Vietnam was broken, just as the Soviets' willpower to fight in Afghanistan during the 1980s was broken. We each lost about 50,000 men, give or take, dead, plus hundreds of thousands wounded and scarred by those wars. Remember the Maccabees. Logic and resources are not everything. The will to win is really important in war. So when Xerxes leaves, Mardonius marches north from Athens to a hilltop camp at Platea. The Greek army, including Sparta's army, finally goes into the field. A unified Greek army under Spartan command charges uphill against Mardonius's rump army in the 479 AD Battle of Platea. In that battle, they destroy the Greeks destroy the Persians. The hoplites again prove that they are supreme. This is the first time you see massed formations of Greek hoplites in full array against a major Persian army, and the Greeks win. So, with the victory of Greece of the Greeks at the Battle of Platea, the Greco-Persian Wars are ended, and they are ended in a Greek victory. This is going to usher in the golden age of Athens. Greece has won. Persia withdraws. Xerxes accepts defeat in Greece. He tries messing with the Greeks, but short of war. Never again will the Persians plausibly threaten to conquer and absorb Greece. A decisive turning point in human history has been reached, and one of the key progenitors of Western civilization survives in order to thrive and inspire all of us with its golden age ideas. Now, have you ever heard the expression, no good deed goes unpunished? Ha ha! That applies to Themistocles. You remember that Themistocles was told by the other Athenian people and politicians who were his political enemies, you defeatist, you warmonger. Well, they came to him pleading and begging to lead them in war, and he did. He led them to victory. A couple years after the victory, Themistocles undergoes ostracism. Ostracism is something I'll go into more detail about later, but basically every year the citizens of Athens get to write the name of the person they want kicked out of Athens the most on an ostracon, a broken piece of pottery. And the person who gets the most votes on the ostracons gets ostracized. Themistocles is damned as an agent of Xerxes, a paid spy of the Persians. Think about this. The man who, with Leonidas, in fact, more than Leonidas, is responsible for an Athenian victory, is claimed to be a Persian agent and is kicked out of Athens because no good deed goes unpunished. However, later in life, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because as an ostracized Athenian, Themistocles has difficulty making a living. When Xerxes' government, or the Persian royal government, hears about this, they know who Themistocles is. They offer him a job as a satrap in the east. Themistocles accepts, and he spends his later days ruling in the name of Persia, an area that included some Greeks over east of Ionia. So Themistocles, whose basically battle plan and whose tactical leadership at the Battle of Salamis wins the war for Greece against Persia, is ostracized as a Persian agent, which was not true, we don't think, but he eventually becomes a Persian agent because they're the only ones that'll give him a decent job, because they respect his talents, because they've been on the receiving end of them. What is also true is that with this Greek victory, Sparta is dominant on land. Sparta is one of the two Greek poli, two Greek city-states, who led to the Greek victory. Leonidas' sacrifice at Thermopylae, plus the Spartan army and its leadership at Platea, brings victory on land. So Sparta, after the war, is going to be supreme on land. On the other hand, Athens was instrumental in the 490 BC invasion, as well as in the 480 BC invasion, particularly at the Battle of Salamis. That's the turning point. That's where Xerxes' will is broken. So after this, the Athenians are going to be supreme at sea. Sparta on land, Athens at sea. Now, the Golden Age is going to last for, let's see, 40, 30, 20, about 50 years. About 50 years. From 479 BC, when the Persians are defeated, to 429 BC when the Peloponnesian War begins. And I will just quickly look ahead and say this. Athens and Sparta. Sparta and Athens. They were teammates, partners in fighting the Persians, but 50 years later they go to war with one another, hammer and tongs, and they don't hold back. Why? Sparta's on land. It's obsessed with its slaves. It has nothing in conflict with Athens. Athens is supreme at sea and mercantile affairs, at building an overseas empire. It has nothing to fear from Sparta at the moment. Now, what I'm about to tell you is a secret of every war that has ever been fought by human beings. The Athenians and the Spartans don't have anything to fear from one another right now. They have no interests. They have about as much to fight about as a lion and a tiger or shark. You don't see many battles between lions and tiger sharks because they inhabit different environments. Sparta's the lion, Athens is the tiger shark, land and sea. They're not in conflict. But the people of Sparta say, watch out. Those Athenians keep expanding. They're like a little Persia. They want more and more land. They're hungry for other people's land. And they keep getting wealthier, and they keep getting more powerful. We don't have to worry about them now, but our grandchildren might. In fact, our grandchildren might end up under Athenian rule. If conflict is unavoidable, then let's fight them now, while we have the army to do it. So say many Spartans. On the other hand, in Athens, the Athenians say to each other, yeah, we don't have much to worry about from the Spartans right now. They're obsessed with their slaves. They're inward-looking, isolationist, agrarian. But gosh, they're strong on land. They're terribly strong on land. Sooner or later, they're going to be jealous of us, and they're going to come after us. We're strong at sea, not on land. If war is inevitable, let's fight now while we have the navy and the empire to do it. What the Peloponnesian War, which is coming 50 years after the Greek victory in the Greco-Persian Wars of 490 and 480 and 479 BC, is about, what causes it, is worry over the future. Who will rule the future? Every human conflict that has ever been is about the future. Has to do with our understanding of sentience. So if you ever wonder why seemingly nonsensical wars happen, they often happen for the same reason that the Peloponnesian War happens. I mean, there are pretexts, we'll go into that next week, but it ultimately happens because who will rule the future? If we're going to have a fight with whatever enemy we're talking about, let's fight now while we're strong enough to win, and not wait until they're so strong that they'll just absorb us. Anyway, that's where we are. I'll do my best to correct a lot of stuff, but I expect it won't all be corrected this week. Remember that December 16th, for those of you who are choosing to do the case study, is the due date for that, and get me any work that you owe me. Otherwise, have a good weekend. Take care.